1988 was a wild year for film. Studio Ghibli released their second film ever, perennial classic My Neighbor Totoro. Tim Burton released his first slightly successful movie, Beetlejuice starring Michael Keaton, and Touchstone Pictures, or really Walt Disney Pictures, Warner Brothers, Universal, and too many more, released Who Framed Roger Rabbit, a brilliant noir-style film that blended live action and animation in such a seamless way that was integral to the story it was telling. This movie was a feast for the eyes, featuring cartoon cameos from characters like Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Betty Boop, Woody Woodpecker, and none other than the Big Cheese himself, Mickey Mouse. Oh, you got that right, punk! What? Mickey, why are you here? Oh, cause you uploaded a 40-minute video on Tron Legacy. I took it down 3 times and blocked it. And for some reason, you put it back up. Yeah, fair use. And it was for a 2,000 subscriber special. I wanted to celebrate that by discussing my favorite film of all time, which is Tron Legacy. Oh yeah? Well, I own that movie. I don't plan to do anything with Tron, cause only nerds like you care about it, but I still own it. I own this movie too. So stop right here before you talk about it. Well, the thing is, you don't own this movie, Mickey. A lot of people do. It's you, Warner Brothers, Steven Spielberg, Universal, and a lot of others that contributed to it. Oh, darn, you did your research. Well, don't get too comfortable. I'll be back if you so much as wink at one of my movies. Watch your back. Alright then. Who Framed Roger Rabbit was a seminal success upon its release, which inevitably led to many, many lowbrow, unfunny imitations of the film's approach to filmmaking and storytelling to be made over the last 36 years. There are countless examples of these, and ultimately all of them missed the point of what made Roger Rabbit so good to begin with. I'll be covering each of these movies today that attempted to ape the success Roger Rabbit had and explain individually why each one does not work. Before I start though, I should explain what I mean by a Roger Rabbit clone. I don't simply mean a film that contains cartoon characters and live-action actors interacting on the screen, like something like Space Jam, where the gimmick is simply NBA meets Looney Tunes. I mean something more like Looney Tunes Back in Action, which is specifically attempting to incorporate the idea that the cartoon characters make cartoons as any other actor would make a live-action film. And boy, will we get to that movie. But for now, the first film to try and mimic Roger Rabbit's approach to filmmaking was Cool World, released in 1992 by Ralph Bakshi and Paramount Pictures. For a bit of background, Ralph Bakshi is a director of animation most known for creating the first X-rated animated film, Fritz the Cat, as well as the first adaptation of The Lord of the Rings, that being the 1978 animated feature covering the first 2 books. He actually did receive quite a bit of success throughout the 80s and 70s, resulting in him becoming a prominent name in the animation industry. Upon viewing Who Framed Roger Rabbit in 1988, Bakshi wanted to create a film with the same kind of technical wizardry used to blend live-action animation, but use it in a different setting. Rather than make a buddy cop movie, he wanted to do a psychological horror film at first, diving into the ideologies of a man who had created a cartoon world, that being Cool World, and haunting his life. While that could be interesting, sadly Paramount, the studio funding the project, did not want to see how that story would be told and told Bakshi to make it a dark comedy instead, thinking this would give it more mass appeal. Unfortunately, both for Bakshi and Paramount, this failed massively, with the movie being a major flop, earning just $14 million against a budget of $28 million. Upon looking at the film itself, it is very clear why this is the case. For a brief synopsis, this film stars a man named Frank, who has just returned from World War II. Upon his return, however, he gets stuck in a freak accident and finds himself trapped in Cool World, a cartoon land created by a cartoonist who is just now leaving prison after murdering a man who was having an affair with his wife. After being released from prison, however, the cartoonist, named Jack, is also transported to this world and ends up meeting Frank, as well as one of his cartoon creations, a beautiful cartoon woman named Holly Wood. Very on the nose. Frank warns Jack that he cannot do the dirty with Holly, or else she'll turn into a real-life human, which is called a Noid in this universe for some reason. However, Jack doesn't listen to Frank, and gets tempted by Holly to the point where they end up having sex, and Holly is transformed into a Noid, to which she and Jack take off to the real world. Frank finds out about this and comes after them, and eventually succeeds in transforming himself into a cartoon character to stay permanently in the cartoon realm, which I guess he wanted for some reason, and Frank and Holly remain in the real world. While this plot is clearly an acid trip, there are just many fundamental elements of world building that are missing here overall. Half the rules of the cartoon world aren't even explained explicitly in the script, like the concept of noids, and you are just left to deduce them for yourself. And most of the rules of this world just aren't explained at all. It's a very frustrating piece of media that is pretty poor in comedy too, with the whole concept of the film really just hinging on, hey, this cartoon character wants to bang her creator. That is literally it. There's nothing more to this film. After this colossal disaster, Roger Rabbit clones died off for a bit in Hollywood, until 8 years later in the year 2000 we got Rocky and Bullwinkle. This film seemingly came out of nowhere since the cartoon series it was based on had actually ended all the way back in 1964, literally 36 years earlier. It was a very abrupt announcement when this film was released as a result, and the receipts show there was just no interest in it since the film was a box office bomb just like Cool World before it, making $35 million against a $75 million budget. Unlike Cool World, however, I don't find this movie completely worthless. It's still not a great film to me, and I ultimately think it's still trying to get a slice of the pie that Roger Rabbit baked. However, I do think it's a lot funnier than something like Cool World, and definitely has a lot more redeemable qualities than that movie did. While plenty of jokes have not aged well, and some are just not funny to begin with, there are a surprising amount of jokes that are pretty clever and stick to the spirit of the original cartoon. The original Rocky and Bullwinkle show had plenty of fourth wall breaking humor and excellent puns, and while not every joke hit, usually a good portion were pretty funny. So in that sense, this movie is a good Rocky and Bullwinkle movie, and I'll be faithful as an adaptation, but is it a good Roger Rabbit movie? Absolutely not. Once again, the world building is such a huge detriment, much like it was in Cool World. Not enough is really fleshed out about the cartoon world that Rocky and Bullwinkle come from, and how they, along with Boris and Natasha, are somehow able to smoothly make the jump to the real world at the film's start. Also, unlike Roger Rabbit, which stays within essentially a timeless lens of film noir for its setting, Rocky and Bullwinkle aims for a late 90s urban setting to try and appeal to audiences of that era and incorporates many pop culture references and music from that era too, which is added to it aging poorly. Following Rocky and Bullwinkle being yet another box office dud, over at 20th Century Fox, Henry Selick, the director of The Nightmare Before Christmas and James and the Giant Peach for Walt Disney Pictures, had teamed up with Fox to do an adaptation of Darktown, an underground comic book published in 1995 by Kaja Blackley. Selick had initially discovered the comic while browsing through a shop in Seattle and admiring its unique geometric designs and engaging premise about a man trying to escape a town full of puppets who want to use his body to be a vessel for them, purchased the rights to the comic. At the time, Selick's film deal with Disney had ended due to James and the Giant Peach underperforming at the box office, so he took the idea to Fox in hopes of it being made, and it was. But much like Cool World, this concept was tweaked quite a bit by the end of its production, so much so in fact it barely resembled the comic it was based on by the end. In 2001, the world is introduced to the abomination of a film that is Monkey Bone. Monkey Bone was an utter disaster much like every other film we have discussed and happened to be the biggest flop yet, making only $7 million against a budget of $75 million. This was an utter disaster for both Fox and Selick, who went into semi-retirement from filmmaking until 2009 when he ended up making Coraline for Laika. Monkey Bone stars Brendan Fraser as a cartoonist named Stu, who has created a popular comic strip known as Monkey Bone, which is being pressured by his agent to be adapted into an animated series and merchandise, but Stu refuses. In a very Bill Watterson-esque situation, he would rather keep his creation as a comic strip as he intended and own the rights to it. While this movie could have been interesting and made itself a deeper psychological analysis of an artist like Watterson fighting personal demons and the pressure to sell his creation for an easy retirement, it doesn't, and the next thing we know, Stu is in a car crash and ends up in Downtown, which is what Darktown ended up getting renamed as during the film's production. While in Downtown, Stu meets his own creation, Monkey Bone, who proceeds to be a nuisance to Stu throughout the entire duration of his time in Downtown. Stu discovers he can leave the realm if he gets an exit pass, but his pass is stolen by Monkey Bone, who uses it to invade Stu's body back in the real world. Monkey Bone attempts to use Stu's body to spread Onorix, a substance that induces nightmares in people, to anyone and everyone he can, but Stu manages to get back to the real world and stop Monkey Bone, putting him back in his imagination where he belongs. If that sounded like an acid trip, it's because it was, and this movie is not good. So many things went wrong here, and the wildest part is how far off from the original comic book concept the film got. Very glad Henry Selick was able to make Coraline after this, because this would have been very hard to recover from otherwise. 2 years later, in 2003, we got yet another Roger Rabbit clone. Why? Looney Tunes Back in Action was released by Warner Brothers, initially starting as a sequel to their 1996 hit, Space Jam. This movie, however, solely focused on the Looney Tunes characters working at Warner Brothers and Daffy Duck attempting to find fame, while uncovering a conspiracy with Brendan Fraser again, for some reason, who has teamed up with the vice president of Warner Brothers. This movie once again was a flop, making $68 million against a budget of $80 million. However, this is definitely a much more watchable film than Monkey Bone. The thing that makes it pale in comparison to Roger Rabbit, however, once again, is the lack of a compelling narrative. The film is largely held together by its jokes and gags, which, to be fair, are often actually pretty funny, but hold no real substance ultimately as an end product. After this, we wouldn't see another Roger Rabbit clone for nearly 2 decades, until in 2022 for some reason, Disney released Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers, a live-action animation hybrid adaptation of their classic animated series from the Disney Afternoon television block back in the 90s. This movie is actually okay to me. While obviously not being anywhere near as good as Roger Rabbit, it still is fine as far as any other movie in this vein goes. There are actually a surprising amount of solid deep-cut animation industry jokes to me, which I was happy to see, since the film appeared to understand how to make longtime animation nerds laugh, as opposed to simply saying whatever might be appealing to general audiences. But yet, despite it being almost 40 years old now, no film has nailed the mastery that Who Framed Roger Rabbit had. But why is that? Why can't any other film seem to understand what made Roger Rabbit work? As stated before, a lot of it comes down to the world building on Roger Rabbit. The film's opening moments, it distinctly sets up how toons and humans interact in this world where they coexist, with toons acting on cartoon sets, just as any other human actor would act in a live-action one. They set up rules about laughter being able to kill a toon if they laugh too much, and show how music and jokes can attract toons. It's a very well-realized world, and yet another thing the movie absolutely has going for it is the amount of effort that was put into making it. Robert Zemeckis and his crew really went the extra mile to make the world seem convincing, even going as far to create a robot meant to smash plates during the scene when Roger smashes plates on his head. The dedication and clear passion for animation is so apparent throughout the film, and really dedication to filmmaking as a medium overall. And that is really the big thing that made it succeed, and what these other movies are missing. The appeal of Roger Rabbit was not simply live-action actors meet cartoon characters, as many of the clones seem to think. It was a clear passion and interest in filmmaking, animation, and beyond. But that is what makes Roger Rabbit so timeless and special, truly in a league of its own. Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this video, give it a like. If you didn't like it, give it a like anyway. I hope you enjoyed me talking about Who Framed Roger Rabbit clone. It's definitely a great movie, and one of my favorite movies of all time, I would say. If you would like to follow me on socials to keep up to date with things there, I have Twitter, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, all that is down in the description below. I also stream about 3 times a week on Twitch if you want to check that out in the description below as well. I have a Discord too you can chat to me offline in. But for now, I've been Noah the Honor, and I'll see you in the honor side. Bye!